Okay, you're on.
Good evening and welcome to the April 21st, 2021 Board of Education meeting for the Phelps-Clifton Springs Central School District. Crystal, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Crystal.
Here.
Tracy.
Here.
Matt Sickles.
Here.
Tracy Altman.
Present.
Ryan Davis.
Here.
Todd Freelove.
Here.
Matt Murphy. Sherry Shervin. Jake Amadon.
Present.
Moving on to the approval of the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. On to consent agenda items.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda items A through F.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Tenure recommendations, Mr. Moyer, Mr. Bayrossi, and Mr. Sickles.
Okay, well, members of the Board of Education, this is an exciting milestone each year for the district as we recommend as administrators and celebrate the appointment of tenure of our certified staff. Our certified staff members begin their employment with the school district on a probationary status, anywhere from 3 to 4 years, depending upon their circumstances. And during that period of time, we have the opportunity to evaluate and determine if they're an appropriate fit for Mid Lakes. We're very excited tonight to be able to recommend 5 members of our professional staff for tenure. Again, it is a very important milestone. We have a tight-knit community, a really highly professional, dedicated staff, and it's always exciting to be able to welcome new members into the world of tenure. It is an important milestone in the educational world. So I would like to start by introducing Mr. Moyer, who's going to speak on behalf of 2 of his staff members who are up for tenure tonight.
Evening, everybody. How is everybody tonight? So I have the pleasure of talking about 2 outstanding teachers and wonderful people this evening. The first teacher is Michelle Hicks. I don't believe the teachers were coming this evening, so I'm hoping they're watching on the Zoom going out. Michelle made her triumphant return to teaching after many years of raising her family. She is currently teaching at the first grade co-taught classroom. However, she started with us as a 5th grade science and social studies teacher. Michelle always does a wonderful job structuring her classroom to maximize resources, time, and classroom support, which is very important in a co-taught setting. It has been incredible to observe Michelle through the past year utilizing every possible teachable moment with her students. It is not an exaggeration to say that Michelle is a lifelong learner. She participates in professional development offerings to further her craft, as well as using every day as a learning experience. It's also not an exaggeration to say that Michelle and her family bleed Mid Lakes black and blue. She is an active part of the Mid Lakes community and supports many extracurricular activities. Our school district and children are blessed to have Michelle teaching in our school. The next staff member I'm going to speak about is Kaylee Shepard. Kaylee started her journey as an MES staff member as a maternity leave substitute in a kindergarten classroom. She then shifted to a 5th grade co-taught math classroom and is currently teaching 6th grade co-taught ELA. To say the least, Kaylee has proven her versatility and flexibility as a classroom teacher. In her tenure reflection, she stated, "Being dual certified is a strength because I know how to make the content accessible to all my students. I am always impressed when I have the opportunity to go in and watch Kaylee teach." Kaylee is also a great team player. She consistently collaborates with her co-taught team and makes adjustments to plan quality education. Kaylee works very hard to create a strong relationship with her students and families and is committed to creating a positive experience for all. Mid-Lakes is very lucky to have Kaylee as one of our teachers.
Thank you,
Short and
Mr.
sweet.
Moyer. Mr. Bay-Rossi. Before Mr. Bay-Rossi begins speaking, I do want to point out that we will need to make one correction to the agenda, and we'll make sure that we get a printed copy for this individual, but Sarah Grossman should be listed as Sarah Thyne, Thyne. We apologize for that oversight, and we'll make sure that that's corrected for her.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I, like Mr. Moyer, have the pleasure of talking about two wonderful teachers at the secondary building. One is a high school counselor. One is a middle school special education teacher. I know Ms. Brunetto, who is our high school counselor, debated back and forth whether she should be here tonight. She really wanted to be here. Her family is expecting, so they were nervous about the number of people that may be here and wanted to make sure that they were keeping themselves safe. I know she is watching at home, so hi, Kristen. So what I can say about Kristen to start with is that, you know, I look at any of my new teachers when they come into the building and I look at the connections that they can make with kids. And as a high school counselor, Kristen makes incredible connections with kids. Her ability to get kids to come in her office and be able to express themselves and feel comfortable is amazing. And it's a pleasure to watch on a daily basis. She has integrated herself into our culture in the building seamlessly. We have an annual event that unfortunately this year will be the last year that we get to see it. We call it the T. Hutch Olympics. For those that don't know, Ms. Brunetto was a Division I softball player when she was in college and can stand still and throw a softball probably 150 yards. It's amazing to watch. But we have a student that has been connected himself with Ms. Brunetto and has challenged her every year to a softball throw. He gets beat badly every year, but he enjoys it. And it has become a yearly event. We added Mr. Sanders did a foot race with Tyler last year. And it was fun to watch. And Mr. Sanders, I know you're watching, but you lost the first time. We won't say that in the building. But her connection with kids is amazing. And, you know, she is an asset to our building because of those connections that she makes as a counselor and helps students to feel comfortable in the building and see their true potential for what they can do after they leave our building. So I'm pleased to welcome her to our Mid-Lakes family permanently and award her tenure. My next teacher is Sarah Thyne, used to be Sarah Grossman, who was a middle school special education teacher, who was a consult teacher. Sarah has grown immensely since she has been in our building. From someone that didn't like to speak up when she first came in the building to someone that is now a leader in the building. She's on our safety committee. She's on my newly formed technology committee, and it's an integral part to my technology committee. She is one of my teachers that has taken this virtual or hybrid learning environment and ran with it. And she is one of my leaders of using technology in the classroom and learning and absorbing everything that she can to try to help her make her instruction better for our students in the classroom. And she is a leader in that field in the building and has been an asset on this new committee. Her quest for learning new techniques is unprecedented. She just is always looking to learn new things and try new things in the classroom to help her students. She makes connections with kids. You heard me talk about that earlier. She makes connections with kids that is amazing. It's nothing for me to walk by her classroom and see kids that are now in high school that she had in middle school still going to see her for help because of the connections that she made with them. So it is a pleasure to have her permanently in our family, and I'm happy to have her with us.
Thank you, Mr. Bay-Rossi. So I have the pleasure of speaking on behalf of someone with whom the board is very familiar because she gets to join the board either at this table or on Zoom or in a number of settings on a monthly basis or very often on a multi-monthly basis. But Tracy Marshall is our business administrator, and it is my pleasure to speak on her behalf tonight. Tracy, I believe, was my very first hire as superintendent, and a very important one at that. As business administrator, Tracy is responsible for the development and management of our annual budget, and in that regard, she has demonstrated a real commitment and dedication to being fiscally responsible on behalf of our community and taxpayers. She also oversees and leads the operational departments of the district, including facilities, transportation, and food service. She also coordinates our human resources operations and all of our other business operations in collaboration with the Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES CBL, or Central Business Office. I could speak at length about Tracy, and she'd probably kill me if I did. But I often joke with Tracy that I'm not quite sure how she hasn't gotten herself kicked out of the School Business Administrators Club, because she is single-handedly the most student-centered business administrator I've ever worked with in my career. While she is committed to fiscally responsible budgets and has positioned the district in really sound financial shape, she is a true champion for students, especially those who are traditionally underserved. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, she helped oversee and coordinate all those meals that were delivered, with the help of her team, who she motivates and inspires, and they do such a great job under her leadership. We were able to feed, I think we're up to, I don't want to steal Mr. Clausen's thunder, but I think to date something like 280,000 meals since all this started. That's just an example of Tracy's commitment to our students. Again, she's committed to financial transparency, creativity. She's become an asset to our administrative team in helping all of us to understand the true operation, the behind-the-scenes operations of the district. And I know she's been an asset to the board in understanding the finances and how we operate. So, lest I get kicked under the table, I will stop there. But it is with great enthusiasm that I recommend Tracy for tenure, as well as the 4 teachers that Mr. Moyer and Mr. Bay Rossi recommended a few moments ago. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Wilkes, but as superintendent, it is with great enthusiasm that I recommend all 5 of these staff members for tenure.
Okay, moving on to tenure appointments.
I make a motion to, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approve the following tenure appointments. Kristen Brunetto, school counselor. Sarah Thine, special education. Michelle Hicks, elementary teacher. Tracy Marshall, business administrator. And Kaylee Shepard, elementary teacher.
Is there any discussion?
I have one quick thing, Tracy. all of them, I know all of these a little bit, some more than others, and it's a great slate of tenure recommendations, but I had the pleasure of being here for day 1 for Tracy's hiring, or excuse me, it was her interview, myself and Kim Skelly at the time, and when she got done, this is a funny story, bear with me. Matt looked at Kim and I and said, "So what did you guys think?" And both of us looked at him and said, "Don't let her leave the building." I think we asked him to tackle her in the parking lot if that's what it took. And Tracy, the district and the community and our taxpayers are better off for us not letting you leave the building that day. It's been a pleasure to work with you. The amount of work and effort that you put into the budget on every year, but the other stuff that people don't get to see on a monthly or weekly basis now. So thank you very much, and I'm excited to catch this ball.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, moving on to presentations. Michelle Robinette with a 2nd grade jobs project.
Not quite as tall as Mr. Moyer, thank you. So I want to first start by saying thank you for this opportunity to share with you, on behalf of the 2nd grade team, the project that they've been recently completing with our 2nd graders in ELA. With our new curriculum that we're in our 2nd year, there is a unit for each grade level focused on research. And for second grade, that is, the students get to choose a job in the community that they would like to research and learn more about. In the unit, the students select a job to research, and they're given research questions that, as they're reading a wide variety of books, that they're trying to find the answers to. So you'll see here a list of some of those questions that they're charged with trying to find the answers to. And the teachers model this process for the students. So you see in the pictures, Mrs. McGuire sharing her job description of researching what it means to be a teacher. In terms of the actual research, the new curriculum has leveled libraries. So students, after identifying which job they want to research, for instance, it could be firefighter, veterinarian, police officer, pretty much, a wide variety. We try to steer them towards ones that we have a number of resources for. They have leveled libraries, so whether the student is reading at a first grade level or a third grade level, there's books appropriate for them to be able to read on their own and find answers to their research questions. This year, with the hybrid model, we've also had the teachers creating resources within our electronic library systems. So in this case, Mayan is one of those pieces the students can access on their tablets and read books again at their grade level on any of a variety of different jobs in the community. So at this point, I'm going to actually just share with you a nice, cool video because the kids always steal the show. And this was put together, of course, by our wonderful Mr. Clausen.
There is nurses and doctors, firefighters, there's farmers. The career that I picked was doctor. I chose police because there's not so many girl police officers, and because I just want to help the community. Farmers are good because they get the food. I chose nurse. They help sick people. I picked police officer because that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to help people and keep people safe. When you're being a police officer, you have to look for pretty much anything. When you're on a case, you have to look for the littlest things. At first, I didn't know how my mom knew how to take care of me, but then I found out that doctors had to tell my mom. We're researching different jobs, and she gave us a list to pick, and I chose the police officers because I don't know much. The project started with picking 3 main jobs we would be all right with. I picked farmer and doctor, and I got doctor. I didn't really talk to my mom or anyone. I just found out reading books. And we've read those, and we've looked at videos, and we've searched up things about them. My teacher put together a project on an app called Mayan because it gives you many options of different books of your job, and then you could choose which one you want to read. We have books, and we have Mayan, and a lot of sources on our iPads so that we can look up different books. Sometimes we read on iPads, and then sometimes we read in actual books. We read books, see what research we can come up with, and just write stuff down that we found. For the final project, we have to draw like a picture and everything. We did a graphic organizer. It's your job is needed, so you can make like a little poster. I was trying to draw what usually the room that I go into looks like. I'm gonna put so that they're like different rooms, and so one nurse is on one side is a girl and the other side is a boy. I liked reading the books and looking at the babies that doctors were with in the books. I like doing the poster because I can really share what I know. I really like it because I never thought that I was gonna be able to do it. I knew it was gonna be fun. Fun and easy. Fun and medium. Like easy and hard, but come mashed together.
Amount of work and the real life skills that they're already learning at that age. Sorry about that. That was not me. That was up there. I don't know if you have any questions I can try to answer or any feedback that you'd like me to bring back to the second grade team.
Bring more of these kind of presentations, please. Great job.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
I love that our second graders are starting to think about and learn about careers. I think that's something that needs to happen right early on. So, awesome.
Okay, moving on to the budget presentation by Tracy Marshall and Matt Sickles.
So, good evening. I won't take that personally, Amber, but I'm sure everybody will be relieved to know that this is the last budget presentation for the general budget for the 21-22 school year.
Outside of the budget hearing, of course.
Of course, well, yes, it's the general board meeting, so we'll have a budget hearing in May, but this is the last board meeting that we'll be discussing it. At the last meeting, we went through some numbers, we kind of looked at some additional revenue, and we came up with a final budget number. This presentation is just to provide everyone with a general overview of the finalized budget. This budget was then will be approved in the later in the agenda, but this is kind of where we landed overall. So I just want to talk a little bit about the, and just so you know, I'm not trying to confuse everybody, I just switched two of the slides around, but they're on the same page. It's just, okay, sorry about that, just last minute change. So I want to talk a little bit about our additional state aid that we received, now about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks, in which it really changed the outlook for our budget this year. We did not anticipate an increase in state aid. In fact, we anticipated a slight decline back in January, and then we were hopeful once the budget process got underway in February and March that we may receive a few $100,000. As you can see from the slide, we were very fortunate in that we received about $834,000 more in our foundation aid. Our foundation aid can be used with our general budget. It can be applied to the general fund, so offsetting any expense we have, we can choose how to use this as a district and apply it to the use in our budget. We were also then very surprised, pleasantly surprised, that we received much more federal aid funds that we can use for specific allocations. These funds will be distributed across all the areas of need. There's specific uses that we can use them for. We spoke about it a little bit at our last meeting. We'll be providing the board and the community more details on that plan to utilize these funds. But right now we have the Coronavirus Response and Relief Act, Appropriations Act. This was the act that was approved in December. We got $1.5 million for that act. In addition, we just received the American Rescue Plan Act, which was just recently approved in March, I believe, of about $4 million. So all told, in federal funds, we have about $5.5 million. We have to come up with a plan how to spend these funds. We need to present that plan to the public. It'll be on our website, and we have to September of 2024 to expend those funds. In addition, again, another pleasant surprise was we received about $400,000 in additional state aid for our UPK program. Our current program is about the same amount, so we almost got double of what our current program is. We'll be working with our local partners and our district to come up with a plan on how to expend that money for next year as well.
And just to make clear, we're still waiting for the guidance and specific rules around how these funds will be used, and there will be presentations forthcoming to the board on a plan and to the community. These are aid or grant funds, so they're outside of the budget. They do not require public approval. They've already been allocated to the district, but we do have to develop a plan in accordance with the rules, and specifically with the American Rescue Plan Act funds, have a plan posted on our website by July 1 of every year that the funds are available of how we plan to expend those. And those are specifically designed to meet needs related to the pandemic, but also to close learning gaps. So you'll see how we've removed some items. We've been able to do some pretty good things with the budget in terms of tax levy because we have these funds. So some of the instructional needs that we were going to try to address through the budget, we've taken out of the budget and we can address through the grant funds. And more details will be coming in the next 2 months as to how we plan to do that.
So this is just an overall picture of our revenue budget ended up for the 21-22 school year. As I just spoke about, we received an increase in the foundation aid, and there was some slight increases in some of our other aid categories. These other aid categories include expense-based aid, so they're reimbursements for expenses we make in this year. Then we get aid on those expenses, and revenue comes in the following year. There was some slight adjustments to that aid, so overall we were up about $917,000. And as you can see here, our real property taxes is zero change, so the exact amount of taxes that were raised last year will be what we're asking to raise again this year. And again, we were able to do that from that additional state aid revenue that came in kind of late, but we were able to utilize it to lower that anticipated tax levy. The reserves and debt service, I got another slide after this. I can kind of go into a little bit more detail, but we were also able to decrease the use of those reserves by about $95,000 this year. Again, kind of planning for a long-term fiscal stability. We had increased our use of reserves over the years, and it was a goal to try to kind of get off the use of that at that level if we could. And this year we gave back a little bit to kind of then be able to use the reserves in a longer financially responsible manner, long-term financially responsible manner of about, so a little bit about $95,000 less. The other areas is just rent that we receive from the use of the facilities and small fees that we get, some other reimbursements we get through the state, and that remains relatively constant from year to year, so that change is zero. Overall, our budget is up about $822,000, and it's 38 million, excuse me for a minute, 310,998 overall. So this is just a general overview of our reserves funds as I just spoke about. We're utilizing the reserves in a very strategic manner. We have a long-term plan for these reserves. Matt and I presented to the board back in October regarding that plan. We do that typically at least once a year just to get a look at where we're at for a 5 to 10 year planning of the use of reserves. We have allocated $10,000 out of the unemployment insurance reserve. This is allocated to offset actual unemployment costs should the district incur any. The ERS reserve is the reserve that we pay for employees' retirement system. This is our non-instructional staff. Last year we budgeted about $510,000, and again we've reduced that about $95,000 to $415,000. We're also now going to allocate a smaller amount from our TRS subfund in relation to the ERS use. That is a new fund. We're just starting to fund that as of last year, so that hasn't quite built up a balance at this point. So we've only allocated about $15,000 from that reserve, the same as last year. This offsets the instructional employees or teachers' retirement system retirement costs that we pay to the state. We have also, we're asking the voters to approve our bus proposition. We're looking to purchase 3 buses. We have a bus rotation schedule that keeps our buses in a cycle and replace them as the state aid comes in over 5 years. We pay for them up front, so we don't have the cost of issuing debt and interest. So it's really nice to be able to do that out of this reserve. There's zero addition to the tax levy to purchase buses this way, so it would not impact your taxes. We just need to ask the voters to approve the proposition and the use of that reserve. The total amount of that is $390,000. We get 90% back from the state on that purchase. We're also staying with about $550,000 out of our debt service fund. This fund is monies from past capital projects that we weren't able to utilize in the project, and we're legally required to place anything additional that we have asked the voters for into this debt service fund, and it stays there. We're allowed to offset our debt service costs and our budget with it annually if we choose to do so. So overall, we're at $1.381 million in our budgeted allocations. So on the appropriation side, we have some slight increases that you normally see from year to year, and there's a couple that kind of jump out at you. But I'll start with the general support. That change is just basically to support increases in contractuals, contractual requirements, salaries, if you will. Same thing for the instructional support. Matt will talk a little bit about some of the changes that impacted that budget line that normally would be a lot higher, but we have reallocated some of those positions to use some grant funds for that. Transportation is basically a rollover budget. We're looking to, hopefully add some drivers, and we get 90% aid on all of those costs as well. So that's just a yearly annual rollover of 3%. The benefits line is usually the most substantial of all the lines. Our health care came in at about 10% increase in costs, but we're able to navigate some settlements and negotiations that help reduce some of those benefit costs. So we're only about 4% higher this year than we were last year in benefit costs. This is also where we would pay for the teacher and employee retirement costs out of this number, and that goes up every year just slightly as well, typically. Our debt service is just down a little bit. As we pay off debt, the interest amount becomes less and the principal becomes more. You pay more of your principal just like you would on a mortgage. It's down slightly. That's just standard numbers. Our debt service does not vary greatly. We don't want it to vary greatly because then it would require us to be able to plan for budget adjustments, significant budget adjustments. Community service is the use of the pool and some other support operations that we have. That's up slightly again for contractuals and a rollover budget. It's $10,000, but since the number is so small, it looks like a large increase, but that was a required adjustment we had to make there. The interfund transfers is the one I think people probably are paying most attention to because 107%, that seems like a lot, and it is. As you may recall, we asked for the purchase of a bus lift at our last meeting. That bus lift will cost approximately $210,000. Because of how we're required to pay for it by law, we have to put it in a line. It's called an interfund transfer. What we'll end up doing is transferring that money over to our capital projects fund and keep that money there as that bus lift gets put in. It's just accounted for in a different area of our funds, separate from the general fund, kind of like those grant funds are. So we put it there. The rest of that number is transfers we make for some of our special education programs. They're also accounted for in a different fund for certain purposes like summer school. Overall, we're at a 2.2% increase, and again, the $822,000 change.
Let Tracy take a breath for a second. Thank
It's
you.
warm up here.
So this is sort of a worksheet document that we've been showing since we first started discussing the budget in January, and it has evolved. And there's some backstory to this in terms of how it began and what it'll look like in terms of balancing the budget. So back in the fall, things were looking very bleak financially. There were no specific hopes of federal relief funds and other packages. So as positions opened up through attrition or departure or other means, we were tightening our belt and trying not to replace positions if we could avoid it and to absorb, because we were anticipating having to absorb some significant expenses through the budget process. So we did have a computer services assistant leave during the school year. We've been able to replace that through BOCES services at actually a net savings, even though there's an increase in the overall full-time equivalent. So that helps, show a savings in the budget. Very early in the school year, we had one of our 3 school psychologists depart for another opportunity. At that point, the decision was made to hold off on that hire. We now know that we will replace that position, but we've marked that in red, and you'll see that's denoted below as will be replaced with federal grant funds. So we are able to meet a wide range of needs, including learning gaps and social emotional needs as well, through the use of the federal funds. So while that will show up as a reduction in the budget, that position will be replaced. It'll just be paid for out of federal funds, and then we'll develop a plan for over the years of how to either evaluate whether that position is needed beyond the life of the grant funds or take advantage of opportunities over time to absorb it into the regular budget. But that'll be part of the planning process. We had a part-time aide, part-time typist position that became vacant during the school year when somebody was promoted from within, and we were able to absorb that position. We will continue to absorb that position, so that shows as a savings. The next line's a little bit confusing. Part-time SRO savings, that refers to our school resource officer. Last summer, very early in the summer, after the budget had passed, we were approached by Ontario County Sheriff Kevin Henderson. They were facing a financial difficulty, the county was, and was pursuing a retirement incentive. And as it so happened, the person assigned as our SRO was eligible for that incentive, but the county was interested in hiring that person back. It was a win-win opportunity presented to us by the county as an opportunity for us to keep the same person with whom we were very happy. But that person, because they would be retiring, would then be hired back at a starting salary. So our costs and the number, would be much reduced, and the hours we could get for that cost would be increased. So this is actually because that change happened after the budget last year. We're simply putting it on the books in this budget. We're booking the savings now that we actually absorbed after the budget passed last year. So this represents no change in our school resource officer services from the current year. We're in a part-time model now. We had a public hearing last summer when we approved the SRO contract and explained this. This went through the entire legal process and the approval of the contract. So this is actually a status quo from 2021 to 21-22. It's just we're now booking the savings against the budget, which we did not have the opportunity to do last year because the change happened afterwards. We are fully committed, and I think I can speak on behalf of the entire administrative team. We're fully committed to the school resource officer position. Grateful to the county for coming to us with a win-win situation so that we could retain a trusted partner from the Ontario County Sheriff's Office to work with us and our students, but also be responsible to our taxpayers at the same time. So that is why that shows up as a $70,000 savings. But again, no change in service from year to year. It's just recording the savings that had been previously booked. We did add during the school year a cleaner that had originally in the budget been taken out last year, but due to COVID reasons, we added that back in, so that stays as an addition. There is a clerical retirement that originally, pre-federal relief funds, we were anticipating having to reduce, but that will be replaced, but we'll be able to use federal funds to do it. And then we have a part-time BOCES human resources service that we've been subscribing to, but the person who has been filling that part-time position from BOCES, has taken another job within BOCES, so we're going to reabsorb those duties back into our district office, into the business office, so that will be a reduction. So that's what all those numbers mean. But what this budget doesn't show, we are able to go out at a 0% tax levy, address some very important equipment needs, but then all of our learning gaps, social emotional needs, and other COVID-related needs, we're going to be able to address significantly through those federal funds. We're just waiting for the clarification on the specific rules, and then we'll develop a plan, a very public plan, of how we plan to use those funds, and it'll be posted on the website. Any questions on anything that I just went over? I know you've seen it many times, but it's good for the community to hear, the rationale for why those things are listed. Okay.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the break. So this is just a look at our tax levy history. We had a tax cap of this year of about 3.27%, and the tax cap historically shown in the red line. The goal of the board has been to keep the tax level as stable as we could relative to the uncertainty of state aid from year to year. We had, and that 2% is a little off the mark, but in 1920 we were at a 2%, 2021 we're at 2.75, and then this year, as we said, we're happy to be able to provide the community with a 0% tax levy increase. These will be the ballot propositions that will be up for vote in May. We'll be asking the voters to adopt the annual budget for the fiscal year of 21-22, and to authorize the requisite portion to be raised on the taxation on the taxable real property of the district. The second proposition will be to elect 3 board members to the Board of Education to 3-year terms commencing July 1st, 21, expiring June 30th, 24. We will be asking the voters, and this is the bus proposition I mentioned a little bit earlier, to authorize to spend $392,000 for the purchase of school buses. This will be paid out of that bus purchase reserve, again separately from the general fund budget. A separate proposition will be on the ballot. We hold the annual appropriation vote for the local libraries. Each of the local libraries in Clifton Springs and Phelps are asking for appropriations of $84,000. As we mentioned, there will be a public budget hearing on May 10th prior to, we're having a regular board meeting that night as well, so it'll be at 6 o'clock.
Correct.
And then the vote will be on May 18th. Is there any questions?
Hearing no questions, we will move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, moving on to our next presentation, increased in-person instruction, and I guess we're going to the administrative team for that.
Yeah, there'll be a few of us talking
All
on this
right.
one. Okay, so a couple of us will do most of the talking, and then we'll pull in some additional members of the administrative and leadership team as we go, or as questions come up, and the full administrative team is here if there's any questions regarding the information that we're about to present and decisions that will stem from that. So as many people know, we do have updated New York State Department of Health guidelines that came out recently, a few weeks after the CDC had made recommendations regarding reduced social distancing. Took the Department of Health, to whom we're accountable, a little while to put those guidelines out. Not going to do a deep dive. They are available, and I think a lot of people have had a chance to look at them. But they do allow for reduced physical distancing in schools to a minimum of 3 feet between students in the classroom setting, subject to specific criteria and other restrictions. So some of those criteria have to do with elementary school versus middle and high school levels, which I'll explain and sort of show you some graphics from the CDC. What we can and can't do at different levels is related to community transmission rates of COVID-19, specifically for Ontario County, where the school district is located. Some of the changes are specific to different types of spaces, so 3 feet in classrooms, 6 feet in eating areas, 6 feet in hallways, and then buses are, physical distancing is encouraged whenever possible, and we'll speak quite a bit about our buses and what it would take to move forward with in-person instruction relative to the bus protocols. There's some differences based on population, so students can be 3 feet apart in classroom settings, but adults must be 6 feet from each other and from students. There's also differences based upon different types of activities. For example, 6 feet for singing, wind instruments, and aerobic activity when allowed according to the other criteria tied to the COVID transmission rates. So other COVID-19 mitigation strategies remain in place, and we'll talk about these a little bit. Mandatory mask wearing, this is one that's different. So if we are, by grade level, able to go to 3 feet, our students will be wearing masks far more often. Mask breaks would have to be coordinated very specifically outdoors when necessary, or through alternating 6 feet. And I know Mr. Moyer is working on plans with his staff now, and he may be able to speak to that in a little bit. Hygiene, cleaning, and disinfection become important, continue to be important. Ventilation, filtration, and I know Mr. Riefsteck is here and may be able to speak to those as needed by the board. Health screenings and referrals for testing will continue as we're doing now, and then supporting the county on contact tracing. So all of that stays in place. In terms of community transmission, this is straight out of the CDC guidelines, and you can get this on the CDC website, and then you can actually go to a page, and I'll show you a screenshot where you can put in state and county, and it'll show you Ontario County's current transmission rate. So basically, if you look at that, there's 4 categories: the low transmission, which is blue; moderate, which is yellow. At those levels, a lot of things are possible. At the orange level of substantial, you start to hit some limitations, and at the high transmission level, those restrictions become a little tighter. And those are all based upon the number of cases in the county, total cumulative cases over a rolling 7-day period. So currently, and I'll show you in a minute, Ontario County is in the red, the high transmission rate, because we have currently well over 100 cases per 100,000 people over the past rolling 7 days. So this is the chart that shows what's possible under each of those categories. You can see, in low and moderate transmission, blue and yellow, physical distancing of 3 feet, of at least 3 feet is possible, really without any other restrictions at both the elementary and the middle high school level. However, as you reach the orange level, you start to get into some restrictions, and at red even more so. Since we are in the red, it says middle and high schools that can use cohorting, then they can use at least 3 feet physical distancing. Schools that cannot use cohorting must maintain at least 6 feet. Cohorting is very difficult at the secondary level due to the nature of middle and high school schedules. Cohorting basically means keeping a small group of students together in one room all day, every day, for the duration of whatever part of the school year you're talking about. So you're talking, you might have 15, 20 kids who sit together in a room. Well, those who know middle or high school schedules know that, okay, you and I might be in English together first period, but as soon as first period ends, I'm headed to my math class, you're headed to your social studies class, and our classmates are all going different places. But with cohorting, that wouldn't be possible. Everybody would have to stay put. So essentially what it becomes is tablet-based remote learning in the school. So yes, kids would be in the building, but they'd be engaged in remote learning the entire time and would be confined to one space. That would be a step backwards instructionally for us, and most districts who are in the high transmission rate for those reasons are not pursuing reduced social distancing. I will talk a little bit about where our county transmission rate is and how that may lead to some opportunities for the secondary level before the end of the school year, but something we're watching. But at the elementary level, even at the high transmission rate based on the science, the CDC guidelines do allow for physical distancing of at least 3 feet. Cohorting is recommended but not required, but based upon how our elementary school and most elementary schools are set up, you're essentially cohorted to begin with because students generally stay in one classroom and can eat together in a cohort, even in a cafeteria. So this allows us, even in the high transmission area, to be able to move forward and explore the potential for increased or full in-person instruction for elementary, grades UPK through 6. This is a screenshot as of, on the right here, as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. You'll see Ontario County is currently rated in the high range. This is based, the most up-to-date CDC information is through Sunday, April 18th. So the county's keeping track of this a little bit more currently. They're doing it every Monday. But this, as of Sunday, we had 182 cases in the county over the previous 7-day period for 165.79 cases per 100,000. So that's a far cry from getting under the 100 that would be required to get into the orange. However, those of us who've been following the numbers know that this is significant improvement over where we were even 5 or 6 days ago. We were up about 230, 240 per 100,000 last week. So this is promising that this is coming down. Because we are currently in the red, we have not surveyed our secondary families or staff yet. However, since these numbers do seem to be trending in the right direction, once we get through this initial decision about UPK through 6, we're likely, and we'll talk about this, but we're likely to survey the 7 through 12 level just in case those numbers drop down in time to the point where it makes sense to consider in-person instruction at the secondary level. Okay, so at the elementary school, elementary is currently eligible for reduced physical distance of no less than 3 feet. Cohorts are recommended, so it's 3 feet in classrooms, 6 feet, as I've said, when eating, singing, playing instruments, exercising, or in hallways, at 6 feet between adults and others. Remote learning would still be an option, and we'll talk about how the questionnaire that was sent out to families. Questionnaires were distributed. Planning is in progress, pending a decision or a direction from the board. We've been working on, coordinating furniture, making alterations to food service, routing buses, looking at instructional schedules in anticipation of that potential move to in-person instruction. And we're looking, and we'll get into some of these factors that affect this range, but target start dates for full in-person instruction at the elementary level of anywhere between May 3rd and May 10th. And again, we'll talk about some of the factors that could impact that time frame. The middle high school level, not currently eligible for reduced physical distancing for the reasons I already explained. We will continue to monitor the community transmission rate, and then I fully anticipate that probably early next week we'll be surveying students and staff in case that community transmission rate does drop down into the substantial range. What this looks like at the middle high school level is a little different because we would have to switch to the 8-period traditional school day, which does add to the movement of students, and it does impact the cleaning and other protocols, so that's a separate decision that we'll have to engage in, but we'll start collecting that data so that we can continue to evaluate what our decision date would be. You know, how late into, say, May, does it make sense to wait to see if that transmission rate goes down before it's just gotten too late to go through that disruptive process, knowing that the last day of classes for students in 7th through 12 is June 16th and regents begin on June 17th. So it certainly becomes a cost-benefit calculation if it takes a while for that transmission rate to come down. The guidance talks a lot about community tolerance for risk. They recognize that no two districts are built the same. There's any number of factors, which we've been talking about all year, about what's possible in different districts based upon how they're configured. And therefore, the guidance talks about engaging with the community to assess, how much risk is the community willing to take to bring students back in person. So decisions need to be based on transparent identification of protocols, limitations, and details. This involved the collection of parent and staff feedback, which Michelle Robinette will share in a little bit. Very transparently, I cannot stress this enough, and you're going to hear us talk about this a lot tonight so that everybody is very clear. We've been clear in all of our communications on the website, any messages that have gone out with the questionnaire, on the questionnaire itself. Bus capacity is our single greatest area of concern, and families need to be comfortable with the fact that in order for us to go to full in-person instruction, really at any grade levels, but for now UPK through 6, they would need to be comfortable at 2 students per seat. In the hybrid model, we're currently 1 student per seat, unless the students are from the same household or daycare, if need be to get more kids on the bus. Sometimes we don't even need to do that. But here, in this case, and we've been, again, very transparent in the survey, we want people to answer knowing that in most cases, early on, we were hoping that it would be more the exception than the rule, but I've seen the numbers, and I'm telling you 2 per seat would be pretty much the norm.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
So, if they're 2 per seat, would they always have the same bus buddy?
Yeah, so what we would do is we would start with those students from the same household or daycare. Those would be the first students to sit 2 to a seat. Then you'd go 1 to a seat. And then the closer you get to the end of the run, you start adding the second student so that there's 2 to a seat for the least amount of time possible. It would be assigned seats so that there's consistency. And then we would use our bus cameras as normal, and there'd be the expectation of good mask wearing, because all of those things would play into contact tracing if there were a positive case and an exposure.
Okay, thank you.
So that's a big part of working on our community tolerance. I know that work is also being done regarding protocols for feeding students breakfast, lunch, and snack, and trying to provide some limited mask breaks. And final modifications to the reopening plan will ultimately, if that's the direction that the board wants to go in, then we'll make those modifications, present them to the board presumably at yet another special board meeting so that they can be adopted and submitted to the proper entities and posted on our website prior to a start date. I'll pause for a second. Mr. Moyer, is there anything that you'd like to add at this time, or would you like to wait?
Are there questions? I think I would rather ask direct questions than
Sure.
anything else.
Yes, I have another question. So I noticed in the elementary school, that's been talked about a few times, that the adults have to stay 6 feet apart. Is that 6 feet apart from all of their students all of the time?
As of right now, that's what we try to do. I mean, you're talking about a teacher in front of a classroom moving and wearing a mask. So the norm is we try to keep that 6 foot distance for the majority of the time. So that's the norm.
So,
Now, at times, you'll see me closer than 6 foot to a student, but it's for short periods of time.
Right.
So if I use my office as an example, if I bring a student into my office to sit down and talk with them, I keep myself at a distance of 6 foot or greater for that period of time to sit and talk with the student. But when we walk out of my office together, we're under 6 foot at that moment. So.
I'm just picturing.
I don't know if I'm answering the
Well, no,
question.
I'm just picturing, just because I'm a teacher, right? And
Yeah.
so if I had half my class, and now you're sending me all of my students in desks, 3 foot apart, I'm not so sure I can find 6 foot apart with all those students. I mean, so is that what you're saying?
What I'm
That
saying is, like, if
I
they're
mean,
up
as
in front of the
best they
room
can.
instructing, they're going to be the majority of the time
In front.
in front at 6 foot. Now, that if a student raises their hand, they're not going to stand 6 foot away to answer the question. They're going to interact. They're going to look over a student's shoulder. But it's going to be for those. That's the exception, not to the rule. And we try to keep those pieces. Lunch. We have monitors in the classrooms. Our youngest kids need their milks opened. There's things that have to happen on a human level that you can't do at a 6 foot range, but our rule is we try to keep that. Like I said, if you can picture sitting one-on-one with somebody, you're going to spend the majority of the time apart. But if I'm walking that student back to the classroom, I'm not staying generally 6 foot away from them the entire time.
Right, and there was language in the original guidance that allowed for some exception based upon the core instructional activity. But
I'm just picturing myself in the shoes of having double the amount of kids. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, and how I would work that. Okay.
And after a full year of reduced capacity and 6 feet apart, we laid out some classrooms over February break. It will be quite a visual change and comfort level change for everyone involved, because you will see and feel that difference.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions while I'm standing?
I'm sure you're going to be up and down.
I'm pretty sure I'll be back.
So layered mitigation strategies. So throughout this entire process, the whole philosophy around preventing the transmission of COVID-19 is that no one mitigation strategy, no one thing like wearing a mask does it. It takes a layered approach of many different things, and that includes hand washing and sanitation, cleaning, disinfecting, daily health screenings. Now that we would be walking back the physical distancing and going from 6 feet to 3, it then makes all those other mitigation strategies that much more important. The hand washing, the mask wearing, the filling out that daily health screening. Think about our nurses now who've been managing in the hybrid model. Those daily health screenings are now going to be managing double the number, and they're really going to need the cooperation of families filling that out so that they're not chasing down double the number of students, whose families didn't fill out that form. Staying home when feeling ill or when there's any suspected exposure. So scaling back on the distance would really require the entire community then to take those other strategies even more serious. Bus capacity, again, we cannot stress this enough. This is our single biggest area of concern, and the area where if we want to bring students back fully in person, then we need to be the most flexible with the guidance. It encourages maximizing, the guidance encourages maximizing physical distancing on the bus whenever possible. We know, and I've seen the numbers, outside of one country run that in order to fill the bus, it would need to be probably a 2-hour run. That one bus is going to have limited capacity, but otherwise, pretty much every bus is going to have about 40 kids on it. And that means, keeping the front seat empty to keep 6 feet from the adult, and then every other row of seats, 2 kids to a seat. So pretty much maximum capacity. Again, loading the bus in such a way to minimize the amount of time that kids are two to a seat, and doing it in reverse order on the way home. But we want everyone to be exceedingly clear that that's how it would look and that's how we would operate. The questionnaire did indicate, and Michelle will go into the numbers and you'll see this, did indicate that actually more students need district transportation in the 5-day-a-week model than in the current hybrid model, which isn't surprising. Families may be able to make it work and get their student to school through their own transportation twice a week, but 5 times a week is a little bit harder to do that, and then they need transportation. So that has added to our capacity issues, and you'll see those numbers. Again, we talked about assigned seats to help with contact tracing, how we would load the students. We'd add the non-related students, and by non-related, I mean not related to the same household or daycare. They would be added to the second seat later in the run. Mandatory mask wearing would be absolutely mandatory, and then the ventilation on the buses would be increased through open windows and roof hatches. And thankfully, or hopefully, we're at a time of year, this morning's weather aside, where the weather will cooperate with that. So, elementary protocols, you might as well start coming on up there, Mr. Moyer, but so mandatory mask wearing per both the state Department of Health guidelines and CDC, except when eating. UPK through 5 would stay on the regular elementary schedule, but grade 6 would continue on the earlier secondary schedule, and we'll talk a little bit more about busing and what that would mean for that 6th grade run. Lunch and cafeterias instead of classrooms, specials delivered in a different way, and then a lot more people, just because you're combining the 2 hybrid cohorts for parent drop-off and pickup. Would you like to speak to any of those details?
I think it would be best to take it in the direction the board directs me to. If you have direct questions you'd like to ask based on that slide, I'd be happy to answer questions.
So the high school ones got here before the elementary ones, but we can't use the high school ones yet, so we'll start with the high school ones and then swap them out as soon as the elementary ones arrive, if they don't arrive before we start. Mike, you want to speak to that at all, or? But we do have the high school tables already.
So how will mask breaks be? Like, how are they now? How are they going to be?
So,
The difference?
outstanding question, Mrs. Altman. So mass breaks, it's something that, it's just like breakfast and snack right now. We're looking at those things and trying to come up with protocols where, how do we do that? And I'm just gonna, you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid that I drink, but, I think we need to focus, like I keep hearing that, that can't work, not from you all. But we have to focus on how we can make it work, what's gonna make it work, because we could list all day long why, things that'll block us. So what we're looking at is, if you can picture a room with desks, and, I'm just gonna use color coding because of our youngest students. And so they understand, and we go every other desk, and every classroom might look a little different, because we have a room with 20, you have a room with 12, you have a room with 15, that's all going to look a little different. So it can't be that blanket, how every room does it. But the bottom line will be, we need to make it so students are far enough away from their friends to be able to take that mass break, have a snack, and then at a certain time, rotate it. You know, the thing the teachers will say, well, that's going to take a lot longer, but we're going to have our students in front of us a lot more. And our kids are capable, we watch them at home doing things while they're eating. And it's going to come down to, you know, it's going to be September and May. You know, we're going to start over, and we're going to get ready, and we're going to get these kids, and we're going to go through the teaching on how this is done and get them moving with it. But I see it being every other seat, every third seat, depending on the classroom. For our youngest kids, it's going to be understanding why their classmates are allowed to eat when they're not eating, and then do a turnover. The cafeteria is a much easier proposition than breakfast and snack and mass breaks. Did I answer it, Trace?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it sounds like it's going to.
There's a lot to it. It's not a simple answer.
Right. And teachers will have to figure that out.
With our help, and we'll be there to support them through
Yep.
it.
Thank you.
Other questions on that slide?
Well, I'll make a comment. I know that I've heard a lot from people that they're very pleased with your parent drop-off pickup procedures right now. So obviously that's going to double, but just so you know, I've heard a lot of positive.
I'll quickly address that. It's not a question, but since you brought it up, I don't think I need a microphone, do I? Then Dan doesn't have to. I'm loud for everybody to hear me. So our pickup and drop-off, if you watch the parent forum, what do we call it?
Town hall?
Town hall meeting, I made the statement that our procedures in September served us very well. And I talked to our UPK teachers today on a Zoom about it, and I had them recalling, back in September, if you stood where I am at the end of the day, there were these lulls in parent drop-off, where there were very few cars there. And that stemmed from a lot of planning, a lot of meetings with staff, with community members, talking about their desire on how that could look in a not-so-perfect setup. Because we know that one of the capital project focuses is that parking lot.
Chris,
But that's what we have.
can you step up to the mic?
You can't hear me?
They can't hear you.
I'm sorry, folks. So our procedures have served us well. And we've laxed in those procedures because everybody has them so well. So for parent pickup and drop-off, we're going to go back to, these are the specific times to drop your child off. These are the specific times to pick your child up. Where in the beginning of the year, we realized we could bring those tighter together because there were lulls. Those lulls are going to serve us well now with double the traffic. We're going to go back to having flagmen, staff members, myself and Mr. Zerkis in particular, being out. We're going to be redirecting our UPK to a different place to reduce some of the traffic. And we have a really clear vision on it. However, we're prepared that if after the first day or two, things are a little out of kilter, we'll go back to the drawing board. But the other piece that served us very well, I believe, in September and August was communication. Getting those specific times out, reiterating them many ways, through Seesaw, through phone calls, through memos. You know, we have a limited amount of time to do that. So we're hard at work on the staff communication, reallocation of support services, and figuring out a way to get that information out to parents in a expeditious fashion.
Thank you.
Okay, so as per the guidance and as per good practice, we've been gathering feedback and data to help support this decision. So 2 different UPK through 6 family questionnaires went out. The first, prior to the guidance got going out and not knowing exactly what our bus situation would be, resurveyed, put a new questionnaire out with more specific information about what that bus situation would look like, and we wanted to be, again, very clear and transparent so families knew exactly what it was that they were potentially agreeing to, and the most important thing being two students to a seat on a bus. We had a virtual town hall meeting with a panel of the administrative team on April 19th that is still viewable on the website. We've issued staff questionnaires, so we have staff feedback that has helped inform some of the areas that we need to focus on that you'll see in a little bit. We had an elementary staff meeting this morning to address areas of concern and answer questions. We've consulted as per the guidance with our different employee groups. And as we look ahead to the potential, should the county transmission rate continue to fall, and hopefully at a quick rate, then we'll probably be looking at a 7 through 12 family and staff questionnaire as well to inform that decision. So at this point, Michelle Robinette is going to speak to the results of those questionnaires that went out so that you have a sense of where the community is on this decision and some of the areas of concern and areas where our staff would have identified that they would need support should we make this decision.
Yes, thank you. The first slide is just a breakdown on the percentage of response. So you have each grade level listed, UPK through 6th grade, and then you have the count, for instance, of 49 UPK students had responses out of 65, which means 75.4% of the UPK students are accounted for in the responses. Overall, at the bottom right, you'll see the total for the building. 532 students are accounted for in the responses out of 843, which is 63.1%, and that was as of 9 a.m. this morning.
Advance that.
Yep. So the next slide is in response to the question where we asked families, if given the choice, would you prefer that we stay as is in a hybrid situation where families can choose between hybrid or fully remote, or would you prefer moving to a 5-day in-person versus 5-day remote option? What you see are similar calculations for the choice of going to a 5-day schedule. So again, 71.4% of the UPK families said they would prefer to switch to 5 days of full in-person with the remote option. Overall, you'll see 405 out of the 532 said they would prefer to make the switch, which is 76.1% of the students being accounted for would prefer that over staying in a hybrid model. The second question that we asked is, if we were to make the switch, and the only two choices you had were to come in 5 days fully in-person or stay 5 days fully remote, would you choose in-person or remote? The numbers on the screen this time represent those that would choose remote. So 4 out of 49 UPK students would choose full remote, which is 8.2% of the UPK students. You'll notice at 3rd grade, out of the 62 responses, 0 said that they would go full remote, so we would have the entire 3rd grade, at least those who responded to the survey. Overall then, it would be 42 out of 532 that responded, or 7.9% that would choose full remote.
And that 7.9 across the elementary is pretty consistent with our current optional remote percentage in the hybrid model.
Yeah, so we're right around that same percentage currently that are full remote. It doesn't seem to be a shift from the current amount of students in full remote.
Ready for the next one?
Yep. So this is just a representation of, on the survey, we also asked, what is your child's current transportation needs? So on the left, you have a stacked bar graph showing that 188 of the respondents do not currently need transportation, and 344 do. On the right, if switched to a 5-day model, 162 said they would not need transportation, 370 said that they would. That's a change of 26 out of the 532 that would now need transportation in a 5-day situation where they don't currently. If you extrapolate that out to the full 830-some students in the building, that would be about 40 students who would need transportation that don't currently need transportation. And as Mr. Sickles spoke to earlier, that's about one bus run, an additional bus run.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? I'm sorry. So I think what I heard you say, so has everything that's, I know there were some kids, parents that didn't get back, right? So I think what you just said is that's all been kind of accounted for in the busing. Is that right? Like we over accounted or?
No, I mean, that's based upon what we know. I mean, our transportation department has been working on, routing for full in-person, and they've been calling individual homes. So some of it may be accounted for, but not necessarily all of it. We're hoping that maybe we'll get a break in the opposite direction, and some families may say, you know what, I could make it work, or we could make it work and transport our student, but we understand, we have an obligation to transport for a reason, and families just may not be in a position to do that. Any help or cooperation, if they have the means, would be appreciated, but, we need to be prepared. But it did go up. It's hard to say at this stage of the game if we have it exactly 100% accounted for.
But there would be no more than 2 in a seat.
We would not do 3.
Okay.
But we've, had to, fortunately, we've been successful in hiring one driver who already has a license, who's going to be able to take on a run. We have another one in training that hopefully will be able to take on one soon. She was able to rework the use of buses to transport students to our BOCES CTE programs. That because of the way we've had to do it this year out of the hybrid model, it takes buses out of our general, circulation. And we're going to use an out-of-district run on their way back into the district to pick up some kids as well. So we have to be pretty creative, but, we did end up having an increase in the main point is we had an increase in the number of students who need transportation.
So transitioning to the questionnaire that was given to our UPK through 6th grade staff, the first slide is just a breakdown to show you who is represented in these responses. So you'll notice 50% of the responses were teachers. That's the largest group. The next largest group would be the transportation group, which was almost 20% of the respondents. And there was 104 total responses. The first question that we asked this group is, what areas of concern do you have if we were to transition to a 5-day in-person model? They were given a list that they could check all, check 1 or 2, or they also had the option of checking other or no concerns. What you see here is the list has been put in order from highest percent chosen to lowest. And as I said, staff could choose multiple options. So out of the choices or the other option, the top response was operations, which includes your lunch, arrival, dismissal as a concern. 44.2% of respondents had chosen that. Second choice with the most responses was our student safety. And third choice was the schedule. So things like specials, a 4-day rotation, that kind of rounds out the top 3. You'll notice other did make a huge kind of jump in the list. And in reading the comments where people put in what they meant by choosing other, there were a huge number that chose planning for or balancing the remote learners. The second question for staff was related to how can we support you? And it was formatted in a similar way. There was a checklist with some options. They also had the option to choose other. You'll notice again, they are ordered from the most frequently chosen to the least. And I just kind of starred the fact that the top 2 were much higher than the rest, and they were higher than the number of teachers that actually took the survey. So it isn't just the teachers, it had to have been the teachers plus others, knowing that they represented the largest group in the survey. And that was notified of changes as soon as possible, and support to meet the needs of all students, which means that both in-person and remote students would have their needs met.
Any questions for Michelle on the data?
This might be more of a question for you, Matt, but of the respondents, I think we're missing, 311 responses. What's the plan? to get
Right,
that
so I
information?
actually have that listed. I'll address that in the next slide. Thank you, Michelle. So the next 2 slides, before I show them, I don't want anybody to be off-put by the titles of them. The next one is titled Obstacles and Considerations. The next is Options and Alternatives. And this is in no way to imply that the obstacles or considerations cannot be overcome. They just reflect the anecdotal, open-ended responses from parents in the comment box, but also staff in the other box, and open-ended comments, as well as feedback in today's staff meeting, as well as some of the things that we've identified from an operational standpoint. So not deal breakers, but things that need consideration and should be included in the discussion. And likewise, the options and alternatives page, they're just that. They're options and alternatives. You're going to see things there that range all over the place. They're not necessarily recommendations. They're just things that could be considered. So I wanted to preface before I show those slides. So the first, obstacles and considerations. Again, I can't stress it enough. I know I'm a broken record. I just want to be transparent and clear. Bus capacity, rerouting, and seating protocols. So 2 students per seat will be the norm. Okay, there'll be far, far fewer students who are 1 to a seat than there are 2 to a seat. Pickup and drop-off times may change significantly because we are talking about rerouting K-6, UPK through 6 completely. Right now, to support the hybrid model, we've basically split the district geographically. Now you're reunifying the district and trying to fill these runs to get everybody here. So a student's drop-off or pickup time could vary by 30 to 40 minutes in the morning or afternoon. So that's something that parents would need to be prepared for because you're completely rerouting the buses late in the year. And then grade 6, because they will continue on the secondary bus run, those students' bus runs will be particularly confusing and complicated because they're going to be riding the bus with 7th through 12th graders who are still in the hybrid model. So on Monday, Tuesday, the runs might look one way and their drop-off and pickup times might be one time. Wednesdays, which is a mostly remote day, but some students, some 7 through 12 students are on campus. It's going to look different. And then when they're with the Thursday, Friday cohort, that's a whole different run because that's still divided geographically. So 6th graders, while they stay in the morning run, the early secondary bus run, they're going to have 3 different sets of drop-off and pick-up times based on the Monday, Tuesday cohort, the Thursday, Friday cohort, and Wednesdays. And that's going to take a lot of communication and cause a lot of confusion as to why that is. But just like when we were doing phasing the hybrid model, we ran out of bus space at 5th grade. The only way to continue on and get 6th grade in was to keep them on the 7 through 12, put them on the 7 through 12 run. That continues to be the case. And because now you're blending a full in-person run and a hybrid run, it gets tricky. Another obstacle or consideration is lead time for the transition from the hybrid to full in-person model. You saw from the staff, their number one concern was give us as much notice as you possibly can so that we can prepare and transition. And we heard that from some families too, because they need time to adjust their own schedules and to prepare their children for that change. So there's that balance between, hey, we've been waiting all year for this, let's pedal to the metal, let's do this as quickly as we possibly can, because we're already nearing the end of the year, and that's a valid point. And then on the other hand is providing families and staff the appropriate time to make that transition effective and do it well. So something that should be factored into the conversation. Managing the health protocols, cleaning, et cetera, at increased capacity. We've done a really good job of getting our procedures down in the hybrid model. Everything then looks a little bit different with double the number of students. I think of our health office and the great job that our nurses have done managing anything from those health screeners to contact tracing. That's just going to increase in volume and needs to be considered. To Matt's point, so the incomplete family questionnaire response, 311 students are not accounted for, and they need to be accounted for because this wasn't just a survey to get a litmus test of what people wanted, though it did serve that purpose, I believe. But we need the concrete information to route everybody, to know who's coming, who's going remote, who's going, coming in person if that's the decision. So that may factor into that lead time because there's, everybody needs to be confirmed, but these 311 we had no response from. So just something to be kept in mind. Does that answer that question, Matt?
It does, yes, thank you.
Meeting the needs of in-person and remote students.
Matt, if you don't get that information though, can't you just consider them as needing transportation and do it that way, or?
Yes, but it would be helpful, and from a customer service standpoint, and setting up everybody from our bus drivers to our teachers to our administrators and all of our support staff so they know exactly who to expect and who not to expect. Because if we assume they're choosing in person and they don't, or if we assume that they need transportation and they don't, or whatever assumption we make, if we're wrong, has ripple effects. So from accounting for every student, because it's a kid, it's a child, we need to have a concrete, confirmed, answer from every family for every kid. Just for safety and accuracy.
That follow-up's probably starting already or tomorrow?
Yeah, it has started at the transportation level. We're doing other things at the building level, but if this is the direction we're going in, and then that layering of communication begins. Again, this was due originally noon yesterday, but because of the response, we extended it and kept it open, so.
I have one more quick question.
Yeah.
So as far as, like, when you're talking about the sixth grade still on the later time frame, so do we normally have, in order to get pre-K 6 all in the same time frame, do we normally have 3 students per seat? Is that typical on a bus run, or how do we get them all on the same bus run?
Pre-COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with the older kids, you're less likely to get 3 to a seat, but with the younger kids, ordinarily, you would have 3 to a seat if needed on certain bus runs, absolutely. The big thing that came up from the teachers, especially those who currently have both remote students and in-person students, is meeting the needs of both of those groups without that remote Wednesday. They have used those remote Wednesdays to engage with those remote students synchronously and also to create videos for the week ahead specifically for those students. And I know Mr. Moyer, if I haven't described that adequately, but that is a huge concern. Outside of advance notice, it dominated the other category, that they're very concerned. And we'll talk about options and alternatives that could be considered. But, as I interacted with several staff members today, they're like, whether you got 1 remote student or 10, there's still the same amount of prep work to account for that. And it's especially a concern at, I'd say, the K2, K3 level, where those students are less independent and less able to log on and follow along with what's going on in the classroom through Zoom synchronously. 4 through 6 at the intermediate level, those, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but those teachers have much less of a concern because those students are more independent, they're used to the schedule, and they can log on and follow along with what's going on in the classroom. But there's a significant concern at the primary level where those kids are less independent and also based upon the developmental age appropriateness of being on Zoom for that amount of time, of not having those Wednesdays dedicated to customizing instruction for those students whose families choose fully remote. Chris, did I adequately represent that? Go
I
ahead.
don't know if it's too early to ask. So, I mean, I see in your next slide under.
Going to 5 days, and then the social emotional transition. Again, not that these can't be overcome, they were just identified as concerns, things that should be considered. And then the week of May 3rd, and again, there are strategies to overcome this as well, but the week of May 3rd is the week that the grade 3 through 6, really 3 through 8, but in this case, 3 through 6 New York State math assessments are scheduled to begin. Chris, we do have some flexibility there.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch anything, they've extended that window to 2 weeks. So we have from the 3rd to the 14th. So we have 2 plans in place pending the final decision on, we can take this week's schedule, roll it forward and reuse it for math, or we can go forward with a new schedule pending 5 days.
Thanks, Chris. So in light of all of those obstacles and considerations cumulatively, these options and alternatives could address any number of those or not at all, in your opinion. So just some things that could be considered would be a May 3rd start date versus a May 10th start date for UPK through 6. That would allow for additional lead time we might turn, if that were the case, we might turn the preceding Wednesday into a truly remote day with no students in the elementary school that day, so that teachers truly have an entire Wednesday, to post their remote learning materials, but also get themselves ready for full in-person instruction. It's just an option.
Yeah. Advance the slide.
Oh, sorry, I did not advance. Sorry, thank you. Another option is 5 days versus 4 days and hold on to the Wednesdays. Obviously, that would have an impact on families, and it would be one less day of instruction after our families and our students have waited for a very long time to be full in person, but it's an option. You could do 4.5 days and do, full Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and half a day on Wednesday. From what I understand, I would expect that not to have a lot of support from families, because half days can be extremely disruptive and difficult to account for childcare. It's tough enough when it's parent-teacher conferences twice a year, but if it's every Wednesday, half day, but it could certainly be considered. I put it here not as a recommendation, but just as an option, and it did, 24% of the respondents, chose this, would be finishing the year in the hybrid model and make no change. Exploring additional support for the younger grades. So we're talking about different strategies. A lot of it has to do with the availability of the right people with the right background and training. But at the primary level specifically, there may be ways that we could bring additional short-term support to those teachers who have remote students to help assist in that process and provide coverage, or just somehow assist in that balancing between remote and in-person students. However, they're just ideas at this point. We're just in the brainstorming stage. There are rules that we have to, abide by, and there's also a supply issue when it comes to the people who are qualified to do the type of work that we're talking about. Another strategy, and we didn't map it out here because it's problematic, and Michelle might be able to speak to this a little bit, would be, for example, if people were truly, really uncomfortable with the two to a seat on the buses, the only real alternative to that would be to stagger bus schedules. So you keep the secondary bus run the same, but then do 2 elementary bus runs, but you'd have to do 2 shortened days. And they, maybe UPK through 3 comes in on an early run, and 4 through 6 on a later. I'm just making up grade levels, but they'd be in the building for maybe 3.5 to 4 hours inclusive of lunch, and you'd have families having to deal with very odd start and end times. Like, you might need a family who can't put their kid on the bus until 11 o'clock, but has to get their kid their kid off the bus at 1 o'clock. We didn't even put it up as an option because we see it as a logistical nightmare for our families, though it would solve the bus capacity issue, or at least address it. And then finally, and this is just something we would encourage to the extent possible, being completely sensitive to the fact that not all families can do this, but to encourage family transportation whenever possible. Any questions on those? There'll be more discussion here in a minute, I imagine, but if any questions on any of those specific ideas? So, nearing the end of the presentation, pending a direction from the board, we would move forward with modifying our reopening plans. They would have to be submitted to state ed. Basically, 2 questions: did you modify your plan? And if so, we enter the URL link to our website where the plan is posted. We submit our plans to the Ontario County Department of Health and to the school website. The required elements of an updated plan, we would have to address, the reopening of school facilities for in-person instruction. We do have in-person instruction, we just don't have 5-day-a-week in-person instruction, so it would be how we would be expanding to full in-person instruction at the designated grade levels, how we would continue to monitor health conditions, so that would be an extension of things we're already doing, how we would work to contain the potential transmission of COVID-19, again, not a huge change from our existing plan since we're already engaging in those activities. And then what our protocols and criteria would be, and this would be in collaboration with the local Department of Health for determining a closure of the school facilities and a cancellation of in-person instruction if necessitated by widespread transmission. So that the County Department of Health could determine based upon a certain county threshold. They could say all schools in the county. I don't necessarily see that happening, but if it were high enough, they certainly could say everybody's got to go back to 6 feet, or worse if it really got bad. Or they could look at a particular school and a particular outbreak and say these grade levels, this class, quarantines, and have to shut down for a period of time, or you need to go back to 6 feet. So that's what we would post. So at this point, move on to questions. I know there is a spot on the agenda for discussion. I don't know if you want to defer to that time, or if there's any questions and you want to take some time to think it over before you engage in discussion.
I have another question, just about, I assume we're still not using lockers?
We're still not using lockers, yes.
So where do all these extra bags fit in rooms too? Is there?
Right,
is
so
there
that's
room
another,
without it being fire safety?
thing that we have to look at. Because, the lockers side by side violate the social distancing in the hallways. So those are, that's on the list. I don't know if you've started that conversation with your teams.
Yep.
I mean, is there room is there room in the rooms for them to be out of the way?
So that, again, it's not an easy answer. We have some classrooms that have quite a few 4-day students, when it comes to the special ed end of things and students that really required that intervention. There's been a lot of different approaches. We have some classrooms that have milk crates that they're using, and they're leaving them in the hallway outside, and they belong to individual students. I've discussed with Mr. Reefstack about the use of lockers. Again, I'll go back to my statement a little while ago. I'm not gonna say it can't be done. One of the problems we have with our lockers is they're being used for a lot of storage right now. We had teachers that had roomfuls full of books and different materials, and we needed to find a quick way to stash them so they weren't lost, because we didn't want to put them out into those Verdi boxes because they're not climate controlled. So we utilized our available space in the elementary building as we could. So, I'm it's on my agenda, it's on my list. It's clearly not the top priority in this discussion. Given a little bit more time, it's possible to figure that out, move some of those materials, and I'll start with my 6th graders and move back, where a lot of our approach has been with our youngest, for obvious reasons. We also have 6th graders going to 7th grade next year, and I would think that would be my priority with lockers. Get them using those lockers so they're ready to come forward to the secondary in a little bit different way. I've had that discussion with Mr. Raleigh and the 6th grade team actually today.
But those students would have to be, the lockers would have to be
We would have
spaced
to
out.
find a way, or we find a way to have them go to their lockers on a rotational
Rotating
basis,
schedule,
just
right.
like snack.
Right.
And that's the idea that was presented to me today to put numbers somehow on the lockers so that the students that have certain numbers can go at a certain time, it does become very complicated, but not undoable.
Right.
We'll probably get back to this from a discussion standpoint, but knowing that one of the concerns for the teachers is reaching those remote students, looking at the limited number of families that would choose full remote, would you move those students so you've got one teacher per grade level, or?
The problem is we've had such low remote numbers at the elementary level throughout the year that there's been no grade level except maybe one where it would have made sense to do that, because then that remote teacher would have had a very small number of students, and then the other students would then have had to have been distributed out among the other in-person students,
I'm not
which then
saying just,
impact spacing.
I'm not saying the teachers just take the remote students. I'm saying if you've got 4 in one grade, don't spread them over 4 teachers. Have them in one class.
Right, I mean, it sort of, so the numbers have come down a little bit, they've evolved. I think understanding and every indication is that next year, the signals we're getting from the state is that schools are going to have to offer remote learning as an option again. I think that's a lesson that we would apply for next year to take that approach. I think we would be reluctant to change a student's teacher in April to solve that problem. We would look for other strategies to try to bring support there rather than have that student have to change teachers so late in the year. The other, you know, for the, not every district, but I know some districts who adopted that model, and as students came in and out of the remote for various reasons, because there's a dedicated remote teacher, they're a constantly changing teacher. So if they were in remote, they had Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, but then if they decided to switch in person, they had to switch teacher altogether, or vice versa if in the opposite direction. We just never had the numbers to support it, but that is a, you know, for a full class, that is a concern.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to reports. Four County School Boards Association, does anybody have anything to report on? No? And moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, well, I am actually going to defer my superintendent's report to Mr. Bay Rossi, middle high school principal, to provide an update on some additional guidance that has come out from the state, although he is still working to decipher it and to seek clarification from the
There's always
local
new
Department of
guidance to
Health.
look at.
What's that?
I said there's always new guidance to look at. So I wanted to talk a little bit about guidance that was given us around graduation and prom and ball. This came out on April 12th. I actually sent a summary of this guidance home to parents on Monday, to senior parents on Monday, just so they had an idea of what we kind of had to weed through and what we had to look at. So I'm going to kind of summarize what they gave us so that you have a better understanding of what our limitations are, what we can and can't do, and some of the thought processes that we need to go through. So the first part of what I'm going to tell you is for any event that we hold, these things we have to do. These are some of the things that we have to put in place. So this goes for prom and ball and graduation. So if we hold an event, anybody that comes, we have to get contact information, name, address, so for contact tracing purposes. Everyone needs to fill out a health screener. The whole 3 feet, 6 feet thing is not an option. Any of these events, it's a 6 feet of social distancing for these events. Everybody must wear a mask at all times. Those are the generic things that we have to do. Then it gets more specific. So there's gathering limits around what we can and can't do. So if there's an indoor activity, such as us being in the auditorium, the gathering limit inside is 100 people. If you have something outside, the gathering limit is 200 people. but the state has caveats to that. So they call a small-scale gathering of up to 200 people. If you have up to 200, this is for outside, up to 200 people outside, you do not have to get tested. And what I mean by that is this. What the state is saying is if you go over these gathering limits of 100 people inside or 200 people outside, anybody in attendance at that event has to do one of a couple of things. They have to either A, 72 hours before the event, go and get a COVID test at their healthcare provider. B, 6 hours before the event, go and get a rapid test somewhere and show up negative. Or C, be able to prove that they've had a vaccine, their second dose of a vaccine, or fully vaccinated 14 days out from their vaccination. That is the only way that they will be able to attend the event that you have. That's for 200. If you go to 200, if you stay below 200, you do not have to test. That's for an outdoor event. Once you go over 200, everybody that's at that event has to test. So the small scale is up to 200 people. You don't have to test. Whatever facility you're at a 50% capacity. So if we were in this auditorium I think is about 991, we could do half of that in this auditorium, but it's a 100-person limit inside this auditorium. We couldn't go above that. A medium-sized event is 201 to 500 people. At that event, wherever you are, it's a 33% capacity of whatever the facility is. Everybody that's at that event has to show that negative test or vaccination. A large-scale event is anything over 500 people. Now you're at a 20% capacity for wherever location that you're at. So if you're at a stadium or if we're out on the football field, if we go over 500 people, we can only have 20% capacity there. And again, you have to have a test or vaccination for anybody to attend. You also have to, if we plan to go over those gathering limits of 100 inside or 200 outside, we have to notify the county that we're going to do that before we can proceed with anything. So when we look at graduation, our focus has been similar to last year, something in person. We have to figure out what our comfort level is, where our limits are going to be, something like we did on the football field where we can have an in-person graduation and a virtual graduation so that we make sure we're accommodating everybody. So when I look at the virtual graduation now, like I said, this guidance, they gave some other options. I'm not going to go over those other options because we're not even, they talked about drive-throughs and drive-ins, and we're not doing that. We liked what we did last year, but we're exploring our options of what we can do to add to it, what we can do to make it better, what we can do to accommodate different people. We will get input from community members and students around what they want and what we can do for them. So a virtual graduation would be similar to what we did last year. You guys, most of you probably saw that video last year. It would be here in the auditorium. Students would schedule a time to come in, walk across the stage, family could get a picture. They would be able to have probably up to 15 people here with them so that they can bring a larger group. Again, like I said at the beginning, all that stuff at the beginning, we have to take, the contact information, the health screener, 6 feet of social distancing, masks must be worn. All that still holds true even in that event.
And Frank, just for reference sake, given where we were last year, what was the limitation on family members last year?
8 last year was the limit. Because last year we had a limit of, I think, 20 people
No,
inside.
I think it was 10, wasn't it? So 8,
was,
and then
we
you
had
had
to
2
account for
staff
we
members?
had to count for the people that were inside, yes. So again, we would do that in the auditorium. Students would make an appointment. It would be scheduled. 15 people. We'd have pictures would be taken, and our thought process, we probably met 3 or 4 times on this already. Our thought process is we would have pictures here in the auditorium of them walking across, getting a diploma. Then we would let the family go out in the hallway and have some type of mid-lakes backdrop where they can get family pictures so that we can, because to get 132 students through here in an efficient manner is probably going to take us close to a week. The difference between this year and last year is last year we did not have classes going on. This year we'll have Regents exams and classes going on, so we got to figure out a way that I can get staff members in here and get people in and out safely, following all the protocols. So we have to be cognizant of all of that. So that's graduation. Now there's prom and ball.
So before you move on.
Yes.
So you will be reaching out to families and
Yes, I
students?
said that, yes. I said we will be
for
reaching out to,
options.
yes, we will get input from community members, families, students, around where their preferences are. So prom and ball are a little bit different, and it's even a little bit more confusing. So a lot of the guidance in the state, and I have the actual document, they give you the guidance that they've come out with, and then there's links that you can go to other guidance, 3 or 4 different links to go to other guidance that is separate from this guidance. And most of those are 30 to 40 pages long. So trying to weed through all of what they've given us is very fun. So prom and ball. And I'm going to give you first what the state put in this guidance that they sent out to us on April 12th. All the other things hold true. All those, the contact tracing, the mask, the 6 feet, all that other stuff holds true. The attendance limits are different because now we're inside. So what they said is attendance limits. A small scale is 100 students. Remember I talked about inside 100, outside 200? So small scale is 100 people. If you have 100 people or less, you don't have to have people provide tests or proof of vaccination. And that is at a 50% capacity at whatever facility you're at. If it's a medium size, 101 to 150 students or people, everybody has to show proof of a test, a negative test, or a vaccination. You're at 33% of capacity of whatever that facility is. If you go to a large-scale event, which is 150 or over, everybody has to test. You are now at 10% of whatever the capacity is of that facility. So as we started to call the places that we have scheduled to have our prom and balls, they are telling us that their guidance is different than the guidance that we have. So they're saying that their guidance, because it's a place that serves food, a venue, is 50 people or more, everybody has to show proof of a test or vaccination. So we have some decisions to make around what we can and can't do around that. What are people's availability to do that? The county, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sickles has already said, they will not supply us with rapid COVID tests for us to be able to do that on our own.
Yeah, the last answer I got on Monday is if they can get their hands on some, maybe.
Okay.
But they're dealing with 7 or 8 school districts in the county, and they have not received a shipment of rapid tests in months. Right. So
and
there is an interest
Yep.
in helping, but not a lot of optimism in terms of actually.
And I will say, I did some
accessing.
back research to see if, hey, could we purchase them on our own? It is very cost prohibitive.
So if we don't go through the county,
Right.
you have to have a contract with an independent lab.
Right.
And that's a conversation we would have to engage in, because you face a choice. Either the district, and we had to look into that. It could be cost prohibitive or not, but does the district take on that cost to avoid the equity issue that it could cause for some families and students who don't have the means to pick up that cost? So those are some things. So Frank's
So I've
continuing
emailed
to
the
dig
county.
in.
I've emailed the county to find out, okay, hey, I have these 2 documents that are telling me 2 different things. Which one am I supposed to follow? So I'm waiting to get back that response so that I know what I can do and what I need to do moving forward to try to plan for these things. So that's just the limits on what we can do for capacity. This is the other fun part, because now you're talking about food and dancing at these events. So there's specific rules around dancing at the prom and ball. So they have to keep 6 feet of social distancing while dancing. So I would like to see how that looks, but that's what the guidance says. Now, they do put a caveat in there that they consider a table group as almost like a family. So if they're sitting at a table together, they can dance around their table
What?
as a group, okay? But if they're on the dance floor, we would have to do shifts of, okay, this table can go out and dance for 10 minutes, and then the next table can go out and dance for 10 minutes. So we're trying to figure this out, and what we can have dance zones. So if there's enough room in the facility, we can have dance zones that are 6 feet apart for students to dance at one time, but still with their table groups. Is everybody with me still? I'm getting a lot of blank looks. Masks must be worn all the time while they're doing this. The only time that they're allowed to take off their masks during these events is when they're eating. Otherwise, it needs to be on all the time. Food, and this is pretty straightforward, simple. The day of buffets where they walk through and serve themselves is over. It would have to be staffed by somebody, or it would have to be a service meal where it's served to them in segments. And if we do hors d'oeuvres need to be served in single containers to students. They can't pick up cheese and crackers from a plate. That is the summary of the guidance that we are dealing with graduation and prom and ball.
Wow, Frank, you can really throw a party.
Can I? I will say that tomorrow, myself and the senior class advisors are meeting with the senior class council to kind of pick their brains around what they want, where their preferences are. They threw out the idea of, do we do something without food? I said, okay. I am willing to listen to anything, but please come to me with plans of when we're there for 4 hours and you can only dance in table groups and you're not going to eat. What are we going to do? Because you tell me and I'll make it happen. But we just need to be thoughtful around getting, I want the students to be able to have as many events as they possibly can. And I will plan and put in place whatever I can. I have to follow these guidelines. I don't have a choice when it comes to that. And I want to make sure that we're staying safe. We've always talked about the student safety as our primary focus in everything that we do. So we need to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. And I want to make sure that's the case for a prom or a ball if we put that on, and a graduation event that we do. I will say that, just to cover all my bases, I've reached out to larger venues for graduation to find out what costs are, what that looks like, just so I know. So I have all the information so that when Mr. Sickles and I sit down, when we get the feedback from the families and we make a decision, we have all that information in front of us to be able to make the best decision possible.
Does the dancing rule change outside?
No.
Wow.
You just have more space. I have this picture in my head of kids sitting at tables and one table group going up on a dance floor and dancing, and then them going to sit back down. I can't get that. I need to figure out how that's going to work.
And it has to be something the kids want to do.
Right. It has to be something the kids want to do. Absolutely.
Wow.
I'm just picturing 200 people.
Yeah, what was it? Remember the old train dance when everybody went around? That's done.
Wow.
But line dancing, unless you consider the 8 people that you have sitting at your table is a line, that's done. We've talked about different activities. And it's difficult sometimes to get answers to questions when you're dealing with guidance in the state and the county, because I get that they're proud. I get 300-400 emails a day. I can only imagine what the Department of Health and what the state, what they are getting on a daily basis. We talked about, can we make it more of an event? Do we take them to go bowling and then go here and then, but I can't get answers from people on, is even that allowed? Can I take them to do those activities? Because they're getting hit from every direction from all different people. And it's the thing that makes it worse for us is it really depends on the county you're in. There's other counties that are saying they will give you the rapid COVID tests. Whether that's actually going to happen or not, I don't know. But that's what some of the other school districts are being told in different counties. So it makes it difficult, and it makes it unfair in some cases.
Right. So there seems to be a lot of confusion and inconsistency from the local departments of health regarding what they have the authority to do, what they have the responsibility to do, and what they have liability for.
Mm-hmm.
And those 3 things are all complicated and slow down the process of getting answers, and sometimes it just stops it right in its tracks. So it's been, in all aspects of things that we've talked about tonight, I don't want to say there hasn't been cooperation.
Oh,
There's
no.
certainly been cooperation. There's just a lot of hesitancy because from the state level down, everybody's doing this. And it's just hard to be at the bottom of that
Right.
process trying to figure out what we're allowed to do.
And as in last year, we already have probably 4 or 5 different plans in our pocket for what we can do. We did an outdoor graduation last year. We know what that looks like. We know how to set up for that. It's just of what direction are we actually going to go in and what it will finally look like. So we're meeting weekly to plan for all these events.
And, it's nerve-wracking. We get it for everybody because it's April 21st and it's late. But by the same token, we've seen what this community can and will do on short notice. So we're trying to get the answers and identify the options and possibilities. But we also know that this community will rise to the occasion and support and make the most beautiful opportunities available to our students that exist.
Right.
So we just have to work through the guidance.
The other interesting part about the guidance that I just explained to you was it came out on April 12th. It goes in effect on June 1st. So like our junior prom that we had scheduled for May, we're now looking for a date in June. Because none of this happens until June 1st hits. So
Yeah,
we've-
the old, more restrictive guidance is in effect
Right,
prior to that.
I could have 50 people at something if I wanted to. So June 1st, so we've already, I think we have a date that we could use. It just depends on what we can and can't do once I hear back from the county.
Well, thanks for cheering everybody up. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, everybody.
And that's the
That's it.
extent of my report,
Okay.
Frank's report.
Okay, moving on to public comment. The board values the input of the Mid Lakes community and welcomes public comment on any topic related to board work, with the exception of matters pertaining to individual personnel and/or students. All public comments must include appropriate language and observe proper decorum. Anyone making public comment must identify themselves by name and address. The public comment period will be limited to a total of 30 minutes and 1 comment per person. Individual comments will be limited to 2 minutes. The board does not respond to items presented or questions raised through public comment. However, the board may discuss topics of public comment at a later time and/or contact the individual who submitted the comment. So I have 3 people that signed in for public comment. So when I call your name, if you're still here and would like to make your public comment, come on up to the podium. Christy Kuhn. Is she not?
Yep, there she
Oh!
Hi, good evening. I wasn't really planning on talking, I just filled it out just in case. Thank you for not raising my taxes, appreciate that. Number 1, and I will come up to every single board meeting and say this, but we need a turf field for our children, okay? They need a sense of pride. You have all this money that you guys just got, and I would love you to seriously consider doing that for our children in the community. I have 2 sons that play sports, and you want people to come into our community. We need pride. You go to Victor, you go to Geneva, you go to Seneca Falls, you see it. Our kids need a sense of pride. I can't say it any more than that. I'm not going to get into sports or anything like that, but, if you build it, they will come. So, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Brittany Horton.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Brittany Horton, 1196 County Road 23. concern that I didn't really see when it came to the 5-person, everybody in here, is OT and PT services. I believe remote kids, Wednesday was a day for them to come in without it affecting them missing their classes on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I guess my question or something to think about is, are the OT and PTs now going to have to service the kids that are in the building? And how are those remote kids going to get their services? And if they're asked to change their time, like if the parents have worked it out, this time works, if they're asked to change and they can't change the time, how are they going to get it?
I just want to make sure we're hearing you correctly. You're talking about how will OT and PT and related services be delivered without remote Wednesdays? Am I hearing you correctly?
Right, so like if your child is a remote child and the therapist said, come in on Wednesday because it won't affect you missing any of your classes while you're at home. But now if there's kids in the building on Wednesday, are the OT and PTs going to have to service the kids in the building? If so, how are the kids at home that are remote that were coming in on Wednesday to receive their services, how are they going to get them? And if they're forced to change times and it doesn't work for the family, again, how will they get them? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I keep getting so close to this mic. Lindsay Hunter.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Marino Hunter. I have 3 kids in elementary school, 2nd and 6th grade. I didn't particularly plan anything. I came to this meeting tonight because I was hopeful that I would leave with a definitive plan for my kids to go back to school. I think I speak for a lot of our community when I tell you that we're really frustrated. For a long time it was, we can't have the barriers because of the cost. In the end, I guess it was probably good that we didn't get the barriers because now they're deemed obsolete. But then we were talking about 3 feet. As soon as we change to 3 feet, we're gonna get these kids back. Now it's been 3 weeks, and we have a lot of ideas, a lot of planning, but we don't even have a plan. And I realize that Mid Lakes is not Red Jacket, we're not Victor, but I have nieces, friends in all of those school districts, and they're going back next Monday, right? Bigger school districts with bigger issues. Victor is completely remote, completely busing. I think we can do better. I think that we as parents, we deserve an answer. We deserve a date. We need to know. We need to plan our work schedules. That's all I'm asking. I'm asking for some decisions to be made. It's all about what we can't do, all of these obstacles. Mr. Moyer is the only one up here tonight that actually talked about how are we going to do this? How are we going to adapt? How are we going to get these kids back to school? Because ultimately, that's where they need to be. They deserve to be there. Hybrid is not a learning model. We adapted to that because we had to in the middle of a pandemic. I'm a nurse, I know that more than anybody. I'm an emergency room nurse, so rip the Band-Aid off and get them back, is my opinion. And I think that we deserve a date and an answer as soon as possible. So, thank you. That's my opinion.
Thank you so much. Okay, that is all the public comment I have for this evening. Moving on to the board discussion. Is there any discussion around the board budget? You want to circle back to your packet?
Maggie said the federal funding plan, they're both required by July 1st or one, or?
American Rescue Plan specifically requires a plan to be posted by July 1 of each year that the funds exist and are available. I would imagine that we would all, I don't believe the CRISA funds require, but we would post a plan for those as well. Those would be, we got to balance the two. They have different things they can be used for, but the CRISA funds run out first. They have to be used by end of September 2022. So we'll prioritize those, and then there's a variety of requirements related to the rescue plan funds, including certain percentages that have to be spent on summer programming and after-school or extended school day programming to close learning gaps. So there's a little bit more structure to that. But they both have different rules of what, there's some back billing that we can do on some things we've purchased previously in response to COVID, and then there's other things that we can pay for moving forward.
Any other thoughts or questions around the budget? Nope, we're all set. Okay, let's move into increased in-person instruction. Were there any questions you had, follow-up questions, comments, concerns?
People couldn't hear me before, but I think based on the numbers, I mean, it's pretty much loud and clear, people's, decision of wanting to get back full-time in person. So I agree. I think at this point, I think we just need to make a plan, set a date, get things in motion, and not hold back at this point. If that's the direction, that's what the community says, that's the direction we should head, I think.
I'm just taking into consideration some of the staff response. Could you just elaborate maybe on what a 5-day versus a 4-day would look like? I mean,
so the 5-day would just be everybody, who does not choose full remote would be on campus, Monday through Friday, 3 feet apart in the classroom. A 4-day model would be based upon the remote Wednesdays that we have now. So it would be a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Wednesday would be a remote day for everybody.
so going back to her question, how would those services that are on Wednesday be provided?
Chris and Tammy, do you want to speak to that?
So that was a great question that was asked, and quite honestly, that's why we listen, to hear those concerns, and we're getting bombarded with lots of different things. So, had we started in September, those kids would have been getting serviced, within the course of the day. So I would figure we're going to work those students into the normal schedule somehow while all of our students are in the building, but I'll let Tammy address it.
So on Friday, I do have a meeting with the OT, PT, and related service staff to work out that. We've had a variety of schedules we're working on already, since February, actually, trying to get those kids so that parents can be notified as soon as we have the date as to what schedule there might need to be an adjustment of. Those Wednesday kids who are remote will still be seen on Wednesdays. That part won't change. There could be, if we are providing transportation, a slight change on the time kids are picked up and dropped back off. But other than that, we're going to finalize our plans by probably Monday of next week on what those schedules would look like for all related services.
What would a student schedule look like on a Wednesday? I mean, right now, the elementary is block scheduled, and so, like, my son has ELA 2 days a week and social studies 2 days a week. What does Wednesday look like?
So, again, we had a plan this year to start the year with a brand-new schedule. We used to run 6 days. We decided this year to try to incorporate more opportunities for our students to get the services within the day and not get pulled out, because if you looked at certain schedules, there were kids getting pulled out throughout the day, and we talked about that a little last year. So our idea was to start with a 4-day cycle. So let's say the 3rd is the date. Hypothetically speaking, let's say Monday the 3rd is a day 1. So you'll go day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 to Thursday, and then Friday will be a day 1 again. So the teachers might keep their in-class schedules, especially 4th, 5th, and 6th, because we're going to have remote learners. That's still, those kids Zoom in on a regular basis. What the teachers, and we've talked about today, is don't really want to throw that out of kilter because they have a good system. The kids know when to show up, they know when to Zoom in, they know when, all those times are in their day, and they're reluctant to change that. But we'll just run on a solid 4-day cycle. But the times for those kids to Zoom in will be the same. Trace, does that answer the question?
So you'll stay on the block?
Most of the classrooms right now, I believe, are going to try to keep the schedule that they've been running currently.
But right now, all the students go by a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, but they'll switch to a
We'll make
1,
it to
2, 3,
work through
4.
4 days, but we can rotate them through those
Okay.
blocks.
So-
It's going to be a little complicated at first,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we don't want to change too much, especially those remote kids deserve the opportunity to Zoom in,
Right.
and have that contact with their classmates like they have now. So we'll just have to modify that a bit. Then you have the idea of moving between classrooms, and all that gets real complicated too with cohorting.
Well, I don't really want to put you on the spot, but.
Put me on the spot, go for it.
So, in your opinion, or maybe your faculty's opinion, is one less disruptive than another, like a 4-day versus a 5-day?
A 4-day cycle was created going into this year, too.
I'm just saying, like,
She
Monday,
means
Tuesday.
remote.
I got to be honest, I'm,
Right.
4-day in person versus 5-day in person.
yeah, I
I was
understand what
just
you're
wondering
saying. I have to say, I am a firm believer getting our kids in front of our teachers is the most important thing right now.
Okay.
I also am a firm believer how we end this year is how we're going to start next year. And this gives us a chance, if what we're being told, and I think Mr. Sickles illuminated this very well, we're being told that remote learning isn't going away. Having the option for remote classroom is not going away. This gives us, and I don't want to say it's practice, I don't want to approach it that way, but it gives us a chance to work through some of the things that we're going to have to work through sometime anyway. And if we have the opportunity to start 5 days a week now, let us do it. Let us figure out what works, what doesn't work. But we also need to be cognizant, we need to give our teachers time to get ready for that so we can support them through that.
Okay, so can I have a follow-up for you?
I know where you're going, go ahead.
So if we're, I think I've heard bounce around, the 3rd or the 10th. Are you thinking, what are your thoughts with your staff? Is the 3rd too fast of a turnaround? Do you think that's unfair? Or do
So
you
I am responsible to my students, our families, and all of our teachers. And I would say that if we're going to go 5 days, I want to do it well. I want to make sure that it's safe, and I want to make sure that we have time to make sure. My concern is where the teacher's concern is. If a child's choosing remote and a family's choosing remote, there's a reason for that. And we need to be able to provide them with the same education or as close to the same education that we're giving those kids in the seats, right? To give the teachers to the 10th and to plan that out will make that better for us. However, at the same time, I'm a firm believer we have to get them in as soon as possible. So I'm not giving you that definitive answer, but I think there's I think there's a balance. If we're going to go to 5 days, let's do it right.
Yes.
Let's put as much thought and process into it as we can. Not that we haven't been, believe me. You don't want to walk into my office right now and see all the different notes and how we're processing through one piece at a time. The 10th would give us more of an opportunity to do it well.
Thank you.
Especially kindergarten, first, second, and third, where our kids need more support to be independent when they're remote. Is that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for answering that question.
Can I sit down?
Yeah, Amber, I think my question was the same versus the 3rd or the 10th. I don't think the other things are questions. We asked our community if they wanted to come back 5 days, not 4, not 4.5, 5. They were pretty clear. They said that they did. The state and the county kind of asked us to do something and assess risk or do their job. And we did that. And they said that they were willing to come 2 per seat, 5 days a week, and let's get it going. Now, the 3rd for the 10th, in my opinion, and you guys can jump all over me if you want to, I agree with Chris. I'd love to, say that it could do it tomorrow, but maybe we asked for responses for the last 3 days, and we got 56 responses, and those were the people the most eager to tell us something. So it's gonna take a couple days for us to get the rest of them now. I don't know I think the 3rd would be fantastic. I'm not sure it's realistic.
Forward a little bit into the mic.
Todd told me not to touch the microphone, so I either have to duct tape my hands to the table or sit back. I think, if we want to do it well and be able to do it at all, I think the 10th is a realistic aiming point. And I think it's time to put the pedal to the metal. You can throw stuff at me.
Please pipe in.
I'm in agreement that we have to go back 5 days. I'm honestly leaning more towards the 3rd.
I can't.
We've been talking about it for a while. So I'm all in as soon as possible. I mean, there's going to be issues that come up no matter what, So I think we're just going to have to figure out the solutions as we go.
I'm gonna agree with Ryan, probably because I'm a teacher also, and I know I would like a little extra time, and I'd like to do it right, so I feel like the 10th would be a good starting date. And hearing Mr. Moyer say that 5 days is, what they're looking to do, and it was clear with the feedback from the community that people are ready to in a seat they're comfortable with or willing to do, so that's where I am.
Chris, how does that affect the state assessment stuff if we're?
That's what I'm wondering too. If we wait till the 10th, what's the, well,
He said
Dan, I'm not going to touch anything.
Yeah, he's got 2 weeks.
So, Ryan, if I understand you correctly, so the state, we're doing the ELA assessment now.
right.
And we're doing it in the cohort model where we're doing it Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then next week I'll use to do makeups. So if we started 5-day instruction, which we're prepared to do if necessary on the 3rd, we would just hold off on starting. We would not start the test on the 3rd, and we would just revamp our schedule to test entire grade levels in a day. If we hold off to the 10th, we'll take this week's schedule, reapply it to the math exam on the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th, and the 7th, right? Did I do that right?
Yep.
and then use the following week when we go 5 days to use those extra days that the state gave us to do the testing
So you have the
for
testing
makeups.
completely out of the way.
We could get it all out of the way except makeups, because it's hard to make up the tests when the kids are cohorted, because if they're here Monday, Tuesday, we gotta wait till the next Monday, Tuesday to make up the test, but we'd have the ability to do that. So we'd get almost all the kids tested that are present in the 2 cohorts the first week, and then the following week, we just pick those kids up that need makeups.
So if we were to push back to the 10th, essentially, after the 10th of May, we would be having them in for instruction.
Real instruction.
Real instruction. And I just want to put this out there. I hate making decisions based on assessments, you know, but it would solve that problem, but either way, we have a solution for that.
Okay.
Okay, I just don't want the decision to be based on an assessment.
Thanks.
But both, I appreciate it.
Todd, Jake, any thoughts? Matt? I heard Matt.
Yeah, I'm into the 2 kids a seat, 5 days a week. Let's get things moving as quickly as possible. You know, in my mind, 2 weeks, you can do a lot of things. A week and a half, I think, is a little risky, so I'm leaning more towards the 10th.
Thank you. Jake, any thoughts over there?
No, I'm fine. We should have that many.
I just want to make sure that we're looking out for the remote learners too, and making sure we have a plan for them to make sure that we can give them an equitable education.
We've had initial conversations, brainstorming of some ideas that, you know, we had conversations with the Faculty Association about those in terms of hiring practices. And we just need to now take that to the next step.
Any other thoughts, comments? Do you need anything else from us? Are we good?
I'm hearing the 10th.
I think that sounds like what's most reasonable, yeah.
All right, then we will move forward with communication, that we're moving forward with the start date of the 10th. We'll develop the updates to the plans accordingly, and develop a plan. I mean, we actually have a board meeting on the 10th, so we can move forward under that premise and have you adopt that plan at the regular board meeting potentially. The only potential for the need for an additional meeting is if we drop into the substantial transmission rate and have the option to do something at the 712 level, then we may need to report out to the board on that data collection. But we'll be getting, now that we have a decision here, we'll move forward. Chris and his team will start you know, the detailed planning part, and then I'll work with Frank and his team on navigating the survey of the 712 population, just in case that transmission rate continues to drop rapidly enough to make it worth everybody's while. But also have that information to make sure that the 712 population wants that. That's our remote rate has been significantly higher at the 712 level, so it'll be interesting to see the feedback there. 40% of our senior class is currently optionally remote, so I think it bears, you know, surveying them for that reason alone.
Matt, real quick, I think I just want to thank you and the rest of the admin team for the amount of information that you've given us every week for the last, we've been doing this 5 straight weeks now with this on the agenda, I think. And it's, you know, it's been helpful. It's stuff that it gives us what we need to know to make an informed decision, and I think, I just want to thank you for that. And Chris, thanks for your attitude tonight. I mean, it looked like you were going to bound up and charge through the wall to go start, and I think that can only help, so thanks.
And Mrs. Benzer's sitting behind me somewhere. I haven't really looked behind me.
Oh,
I just wanted to
there she goes.
Where is
She disappeared.
I want to say that, while Mrs. Benzer didn't get up and speak tonight, she is an integral part of this planning, of the things that I've said tonight. These are not being generated by one person. This is a team approach by everybody in the office, guys, and it will continue to be so, and you will see a unified front and a charge coming from everybody, so our teachers and staff feel supported.
Chris, I thank you for your attitude. I figured that Mrs. Benzer was the brains of the operation, so.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, moving on to new business. So just to explain a little bit, we're going to go ahead and vote on some BOCES Board Education members, and Crystal will call your name and ask for the candidates that you are voting for, 4 of them.
So I make a motion to engage in the election of the Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES Board of Education members.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay.
Okay, Amber?
Pam, OJ, Lynn, Catherine.
Can you repeat that?
Yep. Pam, OJ, Lynn, and Catherine.
Thank you. Tracy?
Lynn, Catherine, OJ, and Pamela.
Ryan?
I actually have the same 4.
Todd?
Hi, John, Pam, OJ, and Lynn.
Matt?
I have also Lynn, John, OJ, and Pam.
Sherry?
Lynn, Catherine, OJ, and Pam.
And Jake?
Lynn, Catherine, Pam, and Doug.
Okay.
So, so with this, just, oh, thank you. So am I going to read this first one?
So I'll read them out first so everybody knows what the 4 are.
So Lynn, Pamela, OJ, and Catherine.
Are the top 4?
Yes.
Is there a differentiation? Because there's
Yes.
2,
Yep, it would be Lynn and Pam,
so 3,
and OJ were the top 3. And
Lynn,
then-
Pam, OJ, and then Catherine
Yes.
is the. Okay.
Yep. I mean, did we already make our motion?
So
Or
you
do I
should
need at
actually
each one?
cast the vote. So as listed, if I
Okay,
have
so why
this
don't you
right.
make a motion again?
You want to read those off, or you
I
have
just
it?
gave 'em
Or
to you.
just, so Lynn Gay in the first spot, Pamela Pendleton in the second spot, OJ Saylor in the third spot, and Catherine Syracuse in the fourth spot for the 2-year term?
Yes.
That's, okay.
So
So I would just ask for a motion to
Can you
vote
ask for a
accordingly.
motion? So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, sorry, that was painful. Every year,
It's a
this is so
complicated
confusing.
process.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
Good job, Amber.
I
know how
I think that was like a
job
B.
is.
B.
That is not fun.
Yeah, okay.
Here's stuff, do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, do you want to, we're on B.
Yeah, okay. I make a motion that, to approve the 2021-2022 Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES administrative budget in the amount of $3.523 million.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 Phelps-Clifton Springs school budget in the amount of $38,310,998.
Second.
Say that
Second.
louder. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 property tax report card.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the appropriation from the 2020-2021 fund balance for the purchase of E-rate and BOCES aidable equipment to support the Smart School Bond Ad project.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the appropriation of $300,000 from the 2020-2021 unappropriated fund balance to that code for the purchase of technology devices through Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Make a motion to approve the letter of agreement with Captain Planet's Foundation Learning Garden Program.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Make a motion to approve the fundraiser for Mid Lakes Baseball Boosters Youth Baseball Clinic.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any any opposed? Sorry. A motion carried.
I make a motion to obsolete and dispose of the technology items as listed on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah,
Okay, go for it.
in regards to dispose, I mean, is there any ability to resell any of these things, or this stuff is completely obsolete?
Speak to that process.
So, we can't necessarily have to bid the items, and so you can't just put them up, you have to put out a public bid and then solicit bids. For these items, these are things that Bill has put on the agenda that I imagine would have no value. So that process of doing that would actually be more effort than it's worth. Mike has disposed of some items, and we do end up doing Auctions International for the items that we can actually recoup some salvage value from.
Great, great. Is there a certain bucket that those funds would go back into?
So that would just go in the general fund revenue. If you remember from the presentation, there's a bucket of like other revenue, and that's just additional revenue that comes in to offset future purchases if we replace.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks,
Sure.
Todd. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to personnel.
I make a motion to accept the intent to retire, the rescinded intent to retire of Rhonda Sherwood.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I make a motion to approve the intent to retire effective June 30th, 2022 of Rhonda Sherwood.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Make a motion to approve the teacher and teacher aide substitute appointments as stated on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
And I make a motion to approve the unpaid leave numbered 1 through 8 as stated on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to adjournment and executive session.
I make a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting for the purpose of entering into executive session for the purpose of discussing matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person and contract negotiations.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.